clarity's sake. Questions? Discussions? Yeah.
I just have a question about what mantra would you do on the meat?
Any mantra would do.
Any mantra would do?
Anything really. All the mantras, they represent different qualities of the Buddha, so they're all powerful. Yeah. What else? Anything? So let's continue. So what we've been talking about is this practice known among the Tibetans as purification. In particular is the 4 opponent powers, is the term they use, and it's 4 psychological steps really that you go through, and all of it of course is based on the Buddhist view about the mind being not physical, about the mind being a beginningless continuity of mental moments. It doesn't come from a creator, isn't the brain, doesn't come from the parents, doesn't come from nowhere, that we bring our own stuff with us. This idea of karma. It's generally used word, which we use very colloquially, even among Buddhists, It's often translated as action. But we can also say it's what it's referring to really actually is mental action, which really means your thoughts. And indeed, so many of those thoughts are really instinctive. It's like a joke to call them thoughts, because we think thoughts are these rational things that we say, oh, I want that, that's a thought. But these stuff that's emotional and instinctive, we don't think of them as thoughts. But you could say, using the Buddhist view of how we produce ourselves from moment to moment and life to life, the stuff that we call instinctive is just the habit of having that kind of thought so often that it's now our second nature. It's all produced by our mind, finally, So the idea of this so the idea of karma, Buddha says that everything we think, every sentient being experiences the very type of life they're born into, the tendencies they have, the experiences at the hands of other people, other sentient beings, even the way the environment impacts upon us. All of this these are the fruit of seeds we have planted in our mind by our own past mental actions, and then actions of body and speech that support those mental actions. There's a way of saying it, okay? So in that sense, simply you could say we produce ourselves. We're not the product of a creator. We're not the product of our parents. They play a role, obviously. But the main boss, the main cause is what goes on in our mind, and what has gone in our mind in the past that has programmed our minds to be who we are now, and to have happen what happens to us now. This is the general idea, the law of karma. So Buddha, of course, not being a creator, didn't make all this up. He's not speculating either. He didn't create it, didn't invent it. He's observed it. That's the main thing to get clear about the Buddha. We think of religion normally as a creator who creates things. Who's, so if there's the concept of a creator, this universe is the product of God's creation. We are the handiwork of God. There's no concept like that. We are the handiwork for the Buddha of ourselves, from moment to moment, life to life, day to day, month to month. It's not a complicated concept, but because it's so utterly different from how we normally think, either the materialist view or the creative views. Both of them say that we're the product of someone else's handiwork. Buddha says the boss, the main cause of who we are is not something out there, is our own self, which is very tasty. So the implication of this, obviously, is if I'm the cause of who I am now, I am the cause of who I will become. It's up to me. So all this process of being a Buddhist, and this particular process of purification, is all based upon this view. So the first of these 4 steps, as we're talking, and calling them the 4 R's, an easy way to remember, is regret, as we've discussed, which is acknowledging that I did this and this and this, which is labelled a negative action. So why do I want to regret having done it? Because, first of all, we define a negative action as one that harms another. Pretty straightforward. But we're regretting it because what caused me to do it is anger, attachment, jealousy, neurosis, the wish to harm, etc., etc. Therefore, a delusion, a neurosis. And that is what causes that negative action to leave a seed in my mind or ripen as my future suffering. This natural law of karma, Buddha talks about, a natural law, it occurs like botany, like gravity, it just occurs, He says that the fundamental law of karma is that negative actions produce suffering and positive actions produce happiness. It's fundamental. And again, remember, no punishment, no reward, no one up there pulling the strings. There's no concept like that, which is so deeply assumed in our mind. Even in the materialist view, there's always somebody up there telling us what to do. So that's why we try to hide what we do, hope we get away with it. But this idea of karma, there's no such thing as getting away with it. It's a natural law, it occurs. Whether the person sees you lie or steal is not relevant. So this is the basis here. So regretting the things that I've done that are called negative, which are actions that harm others first, which are actions that are based upon anger or attachment and those kind of things, which is what makes it negative, what leaves a seed in my mind that will ripen as my future suffering. So the basis of regret is that I'm regretting it because, hey baby, I do not want the suffering that will come from this if I leave that seed in my mind. That's the idea. So that's a lot of thinking to do there to get our head around this simple idea of regret, as we've talked. So the basis here is to recognize that I'm sick of suffering and I now know why I'm suffering, my karma, my delusions, is what Buddha would say. Whom can I turn to? Second R, reliance. We turn to the Buddha. We talked a bit about who the Buddha is, what the Buddha is, and the reasons why we would rely upon him. Because he's got the practices, the techniques, the medicines that I want to take, because I know I have to change myself. So I need to be clear on who the Buddha is, have some confidence in his methods and his teachings. By thinking about them, reading them, studying them, listening to them, making a commitment that I will rely upon them. That's up to me. 27 people can tell you Buddhism is nice, but until you're certain, don't do it. You're the boss. And we're scared to make these decisions because we want to be confirmed by other people. We think if everybody else says that he's good, he must be okay. And if they all say he's not, then he must be not okay. So we're very unsure. We have to be certain. We have to be certain. Now, that's a tough one. We want to play safe, We don't want to be wrong. We're scared to be wrong. So I have to have confidence. So then, the second part of this steps we're doing is this one of now cultivating compassion for those we have harmed. The first one effectively is actually called renunciation, but you can call it compassion for yourself if you like. We understand that in the West. Why you'd stop smoking cigarettes is compassion for yourself because you don't want cancer. Why you'd stop wanting to stop killing or acknowledging killing or regretting killing is you don't want the suffering results to come to you from the action that you did. And Buddha says, remember, everything we do, say and think will bring results, just naturally. So, compassion now is for those whom we have harmed, and then indeed, if we're brave enough, those who've harmed us. I must purify for their sake, And like I said, we can even include there compassion for all the creatures who died for our carrots and tomatoes and, vegetables. Even though we didn't kill them directly, they still died to feed me. You could say that. So to think there, you're not regretting that you killed them because you didn't kill them, but you're having compassion for these beings, who died in the growing of carrots, etc., etc. It's really helpful to do this because you realise everything you do does affect others. You can't avoid this. So compassion. And then we do the third step, which is to take the medicine, to apply the antidote. And we did the way we did the practice yesterday. In this particular practice, it's this third step. You could say this third step, there can be many antidotes. There's countless different practices you could do as an antidote to the thing you're regretting. So in ordinary life, you can see something, if you've regretted killing, and the most obvious antidote to killing is to stop killing, is to not kill. And so to actively go and save the lives, for example, of some worms who'd be used as bait. This is a very powerful action to do. Go buy some lobsters and release them, Save the lives of creatures. Go help sick people. These are very marvellous antidotes to killing. We must do this anyway. We must do these types of actions anyway. If you regret lying, well then you make a conscious effort to tell the truth. You regret stealing, you make a conscious effort to not steal, but to actively give direct antidote. These are simple and obvious and necessary for our mind, because they sow those new seeds in the mind, thus changing our mind. But here, this practice, and all the lamas in the Tibetan tradition would all say that any practice we do that brings in the Buddhas makes it so much more powerful for our mind. We've got to try and look at the logic of this, you know. So, like I said, we've talked during the week, I think, I forget what day, maybe yesterday, I can't remember. When we understand this idea of karma, what Buddha's saying is that every single thing any sentient being just experiences through their senses, any sentient being merely sees or hears, for example. It's like you're taking a photo of it and you're planting it, and you're storing it in your mind stream, you're storing it in your mind. This is how Buddha says this things work. This is how life works. We sort of think this way when we analyse the brain, we think about it like this, you know. So if you think about it, and if you think about how we discussed yesterday, there are countless opportunities for types of rebirth, animals, spirits, all kinds, you know, humans. So if we think here we are on this, we're trying to be good little Buddhists, let's say we've chosen to be a Buddhist, and we're taking this path as our practice, and then we know that, you know, we take Buddha's view that there are trillions of karmic seeds in our little karmic bank, and that we want a virtuous one to ripen at the end of our death, like we talked yesterday. We really need to make sure that at the time of death we can activate a virtuous karmic seed that will cause me to get a decent life. And we obviously know that in that life we want access to the Buddhas, access to the teaching, so we can keep on moving on our path. To consciously think of this is very reasonable, if that's what you want. Well, then obviously you need the seeds, you need the karmic connection with the Buddhas, with the Buddha's teachings, with Buddhists. You need to make those connections. You need to store those little photos in your mind. To store those seeds or imprints in your mind is obvious. So what causes those imprints to go there? Saying the word Buddha, looking at the Buddha, doing a practice called Buddhism, relying upon the Buddha, doing a practice related to the Buddhas. It's sort of not rocket science, it's obvious. Because the Buddha would say, whatever we wake up in this life, and whatever the parents we're born to is because of strong karmic history with those sentient beings. The creatures we meet because of strong karmic history. The actions we do, strong, you know, in relation to sentient beings, like kill fish or save fish, whichever one it is. It's because of that habit of that type of activity. So it's up to us, the kind of garden we have in the future. We have to plant the right seeds. It's up to us. We're so used to thinking, even if it is karma, that somehow it's magically up to somebody else. It's very weird to us to think that you can plan your next life. It sounds very peculiar to us. Because if we have the Christian teaching, it's up to God. God will call, you know, God calls the shots. If it's up to the materialist view, there's no concept of future rebirth. So it doesn't matter anyway. You're just going to die and turn into dust. If you're a Buddhist, we hear about karma, we still vaguely think it's up to somebody else who's going to judge me. You know, we have these ideas. Well, there's no concept like that. It's up to you. So this is why, if you know you want a decent garden in the future, you better know the seeds that you want to plant. You're the boss. You have to decide what future seeds you want. You have to decide the future life you want. You have to decide. You are in charge. This is very surprising to us. Even as we hear it as Buddhists, it's still strange. Because we're so addicted to thinking that it's just all kind of potluck, you know. Or someone else will call the shots, and I'm a good girl, they'll see it and they'll reward me. Not like that. You're the boss. So I think here I am a Buddhist in this life. You know, I'm not enlightened yet, so I want to keep on moving, and I want to have the same conditions, but at least the same conditions in the future. I want decent. This time I don't want to wait till I'm 32 to meet the Lamas. I'd like to meet them from the time I'm born, so therefore I'd like to have Buddhist parents. It will be handy. So I'd like to create the cause to have that. I want to create the cause to have a good mind, so I don't want to kill, lie, steal, bad mouth, shoot myself off, harm other people. I'd like to have that, so I'm going to practice vows of morality, train my mind in that. I want to make sure that I've got, you know, continue to receive the teachings as soon as possible and take the Bodhisattva vows again and the Tantric vows and get all the practices under my belt in the future, so I better create all those causes by doing all of that now. I want to at least be, you know, if I'm going to be another human, I better make sure what the cause of being a human is, so I get that. All these things, it's all there. It's up to me to know what the causes are, so sow those seeds and ensure that I get them. And so therefore I need to continue to connect with the Buddha, because it's his teachings I want. And so any practices I do, if I can sit there very, I can do, for example, single-pointed concentration meditation or mindfulness as it's commonly known in the world now, which is a marvelous technique that helps you steady your mind, It's fundamental to all of Buddha's teachings. But so many people think, well, that's being a Buddhist, To visualize the Buddha sounds kind of cute and nice, but I'd rather meditate, please. And the default mode of meditation for most people is mindfulness meditation. Well, you could watch, according to this view, you could watch your mind according to this way of looking, you could watch your mind for 1,000 years. Very nice, you get some good concentration. Doesn't mean you've got to beat the Buddha. You've got to have a connection with the Buddha. You've got to want to have a connection with the Buddha. So any practices you do, because most of us won't sit there and meditate 8 hours a day. Most of us won't give up sex, drugs and rock and roll, become a monk or nun and go to the mountains and get renunciation and get realizations. Most of us will not do this. So we use skillful means. So we do a little bit of practice in the morning, visualize the Buddha, think of Tara, Chenrezig, do a few mantras, as well as do single point of concentration. Unbelievably more powerful, because you made a strong connection with the Buddha. The imprint's gone strongly in. You'll meet again very quickly. Not only that, because of what an enlightened being is, super powerful, enlightened, wise, infinite compassion, infinite wisdom. And such a more potent object of any actions I do. My actions of generosity. More powerful for me karmically if I give to something like, say, a place that helps people's minds, more than, say, where they help their bodies. Because, as Lama Zopa says, you could be generous and give food to every suffering person on this earth. Amazing, beyond belief. But you could give one piece of advice, spiritual advice, to one person. That could be more powerful in the long term, because that one person, on the basis of that, can continue their work and get enlightened, and they can benefit countless sentient beings, and they can benefit them from life after life after life. But just if you benefit the body, it's only this life that they're benefiting. There's no benefit to their mind at all, necessarily. So we can make decisions like this. We've got to choose the most powerful practices for our own sake, because we're not going to be doing many practices. So let's choose the most potent one, the most beneficial practice, the one that will help me most help others. So choose a practice that brings in the Buddha, because of the power of the object, as they call it. So the way the Lamas would say is, to help others is a huge practice. It's the practice of compassion. To help others, to benefit others, to give to others. Incredible, amazing. But given that we've got so small time in our lives, select. We should narrow it down to some options of what's the best practice that will be beneficial for me, or I can be most beneficial for others. So you can see, based on this type of logic, perhaps, that working, so volunteering at a place like a spiritual centre that helps people's minds, will be far more powerful karmically, meritoriously, and for you for purification than, say, helping the dogs home. Nothing wrong with helping dogs home. It's more powerful. Because the work a place like this helps people's minds, which is much more long-term. I'm not used to thinking this way. It sounds kind of a bit hierarchical. You think it sounds a bit, I don't know what. Maybe it sounds right, I don't know, to you. You have to select the most. I've heard Lama Zopa Rinpoche say that in terms of, you see, everything we do, every practice we do, if we, in terms of spiritual practice, using this analogy of seeds and fruits, or using the idea of cause and effect, it's like we have to do practices of purification. That's called the weeding, pulling out the weeds, and we have to do the practice of growing the flowers, which is creating merit. It's the term they use in Buddhism. That just means doing virtuous things. Stopping doing negative things and purifying them and doing virtuous things. We sow virtuous seeds and we pull out the bad seeds, weeding and growing flowers. And that's really one way of summarising what a practice is. To head to, to do the getting towards becoming a Buddha. So, I've heard Rinpoche say, in terms of purification and the creation of merit, just working for a day for a centre like this, or doing Dharma work that's related to the teachings or something like that, you know, say editing the teachings or something, or working for a Dharma center, because of the power of the object, because of how that information or a center can benefit so many people long term. In terms of merit and purification, it's equivalent to what you do in years and years of retreat, just working for a day. So you have to think about that, try to see the logic of it, you know? The power of the object, they talk about like that. So that we'll be selective. We have to, we've only got so much time to do practice. So select practices that bring in the Buddhas, so much more powerful for your mind. Say mantras, practices, offering to the Buddhas. These things. Said to be very potent. So this third practice then is one of those, is where we visualize the Buddha, Vajrasattva, as I said, and recite the mantra. Recite the mantra. As you're visualizing certain, you know, just using your creative imagination, nectar coming, purifying all the actions of body, speech and mind, like we did yesterday. And we'll finish the day again today with that. And the fourth step, as we did last night, as we said, is this one of making, you know, the resolve, the 4 R's. Resolve, it's the determination to not do again. So, the more we understand how we create karma, how every thought we have and every action of body and speech that we do programs our mind in those very thoughts and actions of body and speech, which will necessarily, depending on the character of the body and actions of body, speech and mind, will ripen as my future experiences. This is the fundamental law that Buddha says runs the universe. Given that, and then given that, you know, here we are in the very first level of practice, attempting to refrain. If we look at junior school, the first level, scope of teachings in Lord Buddha's teachings, like we've been talking, junior school as I like to call it, that level of practice, it seems passive. You know, merely not killing, merely not stealing, merely not lying. It seems really quite passive. So if we remember that every thing that arises in the mind, that's a karma. You could say that, broadly speaking. That's what it means. And that will then, based upon the character of that thing that arises, based upon what the body and speech do to carry out the wishes of that thing that arises in the mind, this is what's called negative and positive. You know, the positive ones are motivated by virtue, the negative ones are motivated by delusion, neurosis, ego-based. So the very first level of practice, forget about the mind, that's the real job, is control the body and speech, as we've been talking. Control the body and speech. Don't kill, don't lie, don't steal. Seems, as I said, really like passive. We think helping is going off and helping people. That's advanced, that's a compassion wing. You've got to first control yourself and not harm others. Often they say in Buddhism, yeah, benefit others. But if you can't, at least don't harm them. Don't underestimate this. Don't underestimate this, it's phenomenal. But the point is this. This is where we come now, the need once you become involved in being a Buddhist, to understand the various things when we do them that make the practice more powerful. So one example I've used is any practices that relate to the Buddha, because of the power of enlightened beings. Makes the action we do more potent for us, more meritorious, more virtuous, and it purifies the mind. We need to be skillful to choose those practices because we've only got so much time. And the other one that's so crucial, like I talked yesterday, we'll just talk about it more here, which I'm doing, is the power of vows. Maybe we talk about that in the refuge day, I can't remember. This is a huge one for the Buddha. We really got to think this through. Already we discussed a bit the power of having a vow, how it protects you, a firm decision to do something. We can see the strength of that, the effect it has on our life. So we can see ordinarily, psychologically, the benefit of a strong determination, you know. A strong determination not to do something. So Gina has made a strong determination in her life not to eat meat. That guides her completely. It's now become such habit. She just never do it. That's a determination to do something, an intention, an intentional action. So the way, and this is the big one of the, this is the main thing in Buddha's instructions that are taught in the Vinaya, this basket of the teachings on discipline and morality for the Buddha. That these different sets of vows, as they're called. So the very first level of, the very first instruction Buddha gives, his recommendation, is not the vows yet, but even before we do that, before we formally become a Buddhist and formally take refuge and take vows, the very first entry into Buddhist practice, don't worry about your mind yet, which is what meditation is, and we think that's being a Buddhist, but excuse me, before we get anywhere near there, which is like high school, you've got to first control your body and your speech. Control your body and your speech. So Buddha recommends we don't do certain actions, just 7, not that many. In bullet points, 7 don'ts, as a recommendation, as a basis for living your life. Make a decision that the very least you can do is refrain from killing, cheating on a partner, stealing, and then lying, harsh speech, talking about bad things, bad-mouthing people behind their backs, disharmonious, and just rabbiting on about nothing. These 4 of the speech and 3 of the body. They're not vows yet, but they're commitments that get you in the right track. Already stupendous. Already will guide you in your life. Already will protect you. But it's not powerful enough to do that. Because it's only when you meet that mouse that you go, oops, I'd better not kill. The rest of the day you're not killing, but merely not killing is fine for the mice, is fine for the cockroaches. They're going to have a party, they'll enjoy. But for you, there's no virtue. Why? It's obvious. If karma come down to what goes on in your mind, and that every time you have any thoughts or, that the spontaneous whatever arises in our mind is programming us continually. So if one of the major actions of morality is to refrain from killing, a conscious, intentional refraining from killing, this first level of morality, the morality of restraint, seemingly passive, but not at all when you do it powerfully, a conscious decision to not kill, not lie, not steal. It's without, we're getting to the point now, without living in the vow to not kill, which is so potent for the Buddha, which we're talking about in a second, getting there. Still fantastic to live your life with intention not to kill. But it's only when you intend not to kill, when you meet the mouse or when you meet the mosquito, once or twice a day, if you're lucky, maybe once a week, if you don't live with the roaches, It's only then that anything happens in your mind, because that thought is what leaves the seed. So, that's not enough. For Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he says, times are so degenerate in samsara, there's so much delusion, so much suffering, so much habitual negativity in the minds of even ordinary beings, that just being good doesn't have enough power. So this is where vows come in, and this is massive for the Buddha. He talks about 3 sets of vows. The very first level of the vows we're discussing here, the ground level vows, the foundation vows of living in morality, the morality of restraint. And that come down, of those 10, you bring it down to 5. There's 4 of those plus another one. So here the 5 vows are to not kill any living being, not to jump on another person's partner, not to take things that aren't given, not to lie. So 3 of the body, 1 of speech, just 1, and then the 5th one is no drugs and alcohol. So when you take this set of vows, the prati moksha vows, the vows of individual liberation, the vows such that will, when you take them and live according to them, keep them purely and purify them daily, will bring stupendous power and growth and purification and merit to your practice. Because, for the Buddha, a person, for example, it says in the teachings, Buddha says, a person who's living in this set of vows and keeping them purely and purifying, taking them seriously, having them as their guide in their life for their behaviour, they've got this subtle physical energy that's visible to clairvoyance. It's got a subtle form. It's very powerful, so potent. So living in the vow to not kill if you've taken it, then it's not, without the vow, it's only when you intentionally decide not to kill that you create any merit or purify your mind, and it's very weak. For your sake. The roaches are happy, you leave them alone. And they're happy 24 hours a day. But you only create merit whenever you meet a roach. And it's very weak when you do. But if you've got a vow not to kill, 24 hours a day you've got that vow. When you're walking down the street, when you're in the pub with your friend, when you're asleep, you're ticking over virtue. And purifying your mind. Ticking over virtue and purifying your mind 24 hours a day. Buddha says this. And the Lamas really are into this. Really. So the more we think of the meaning of karma, the more we think about the nature of mind, the more we think about actions, it takes time to hear all this in a practical way, in a realistic way, in a psychological way, you know. Don't just hear it as religious superstition. It's super potent. So it's like falling off a log, easy way to practice. Falling off a log, easy. Live in the vows. Keep them purely. Very amazing, very special, so special way to live your life. So all the more reason then to understand why it's absolutely vital to do this for opponent powers. And at the fourth step, in the first step, to regret the weakening or indeed breaking, even slightly, out of laziness maybe, weakening the vows. And then crucially, at this fourth step, vowing never to kill again, which is the vow you took anyway. So if every day you regret the harm you've done by accident, killing by accident or whatever, and indeed if you broke it properly, and we'll discuss what that means, how you break it properly, and then determining never to do it again, what do you think it's going to do to your mind? Completely transform you. Totally reconfigure your very being. This is the meaning of karma, you know. So it's like not enough just to be a good person. It's not enough just to be a nice person and even merely refrain from killing. Like I said, roaches are happy 24 hours a day. You leave them in peace. But you don't get much merit from it, not much benefit, because your mind is not engaged in it. So every second your mind is engaged, every time you have a vow, even when you're not engaged in it, the power is so strong that it purifies your mind and ticks over constant virtuous karmic seeds. And we've got to have as much of that as possible at the time we die, so we can have a decent human life, so we can keep going in our spiritual practice. This is practical. All this stuff is practical. Don't hear it as moralistic, which is how we used to hear in religion. It's practical, it's practical, it's practical, it's practical. Practical. Not judgment, not reward, not blame, none of those things. It's the tools you're attempting to use as a Buddhist to help you become the person you want to become. Any questions about that? Is that clear, Bill?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Question.
Conversely, is the breaking of that vow?
Yes, therefore more heavy, yeah. Of course, absolutely. So let's look at how you break it. You see, the point is here is you break a vow when there's intention to break it. If there's no intention, I mean, we're killing all the time. We're running over the ants and smashing the creatures. I know we don't mean to, but so that's not breaking a vow. Breaking a vow has to be an intention to do it, knowing it's a vow, not caring, and not want, and sort of not, and like no conscience about it, and not caring about it, having no regret. So it's quite heavy to break a vow, because usually it's sort of didn't mean to kill. You sort of, oh, the wretched mosquito, you sort of didn't mean to kill it, or you tried to get it out but you missed it and you died. That's not. It's just it's a bit weak maybe, but it's not fully breaking a vow. So when it comes to these vows, you break the killing. You break in a major way, and that means you need to take it again. Because if you take these vows formally in front of somebody for whom you as a person who for you is the Buddha, you decide when normally you take it when you've taken refuge. First you take refuge formally, and then you would take the vows. You wouldn't take the vows before taking refuge. So you take it in front of somebody whom you've decided will be one of your teachers, and then you see that person as the Buddha, and then you sit there formally, and what you're doing is sort of plugging into this power source, is my way of putting it, that goes in an unbroken lineage, or oral lineage, all the way back to the Buddha. Unbroken. My vows that I received came from my Lama, who came from theirs. It got back to the time in the 8th century in Tibet, who came from India, and that went back further, the 5th century, 4th century, all the way back to the Buddha. So there's power source, this unbroken lineage. It's very potent, very marvellous, you know. That's a lot of the knowledge we have. You know, I learned how to make a cake from my mother. Where'd she get it? From her mum. Where'd she get it? From her mum. You could probably track it back to who knows what mothers. This power source of knowledge, you know, oral tradition. So this, you know, you take it in front of somebody on your knee, you vow 3 times, you repeat 3 times these things, you know. So then, when you sort of break it, you intentionally, you know, especially, so okay, you break killing in a major way if you kill a human being with intention, knowing it's a vow, not caring, you know, and not interested in regretting it or purifying it, you know, and happy, you know, wouldn't care if you did it again, sort of thing. So quite heavy to break a vow. So then, of course, if you do killing in a major way during that one, you break them all at the root, and you have to take again in front of somebody. If you break in a minor way, if you kill another creature, kill an ant, kill a dog, kill a non-human being, then you need to just purify the vow. Purify it at the end of the day with your 4 opponent powers. Which is why, if you do this practice every day, you keep ahead of the game. Because it brings you to the forefront of your own mind and your own decision. If you haven't taken vows, it's reminding you every day if you're regretting the things that you've done that are going to cause you suffering, and then you vow not to do it again, or you vow to watch it. This is where you keep it in the front of your mind. It's really so sensible and reasonable, you know, for your own benefit. You break lying in a major way if you lie about your spiritual attainments, and you break in a minor way if you take, so to speak, a regular lie. You break stealing in a major way if you steal or take something that hasn't been offered to you that is of value to somebody else. And you break in a minor way if you take anything that hasn't been offered. Sexual misconduct, if you do a really strict reading of the Buddhist text, you practically can't have any sex at all. I tell you, they're stricter than the Catholics. Yeah. But you have to understand it's all based on attachment and the logic behind it. It's not because somebody says you shouldn't, because when you understand the intensity of sexual attachment, we can see how it can make us crazy and cause so much suffering on earth. You know, look at, I mean, why do you think 40% of all women on this earth get murdered by their partners? It ain't because of love. It's not because of, you know, it's because of attachment. And which one? Sexual attachment, the strongest, the intimate one, you know. So it's an intense attachment, it's obvious. So the harm, the pain that it causes when it goes berserk, you know, beyond, utter beyond bearing. So this is a pretty intense vow. So anyway, the vow normally, when it's given, depends on the person who gives it. I know when I give it just to the one level of it, which is simply cheating on another person's partner or cheating on your partner, you know. That's the vow. The vow isn't to not sleep around. If you haven't got a partner, you can sleep around as much as you like. You're just probably increasing your attachment, but you're not breaking your vow. It's okay. It's the vow, you know. They talk about natural negativity and then those that are prescribed. So natural negativity, killing would be called one of them, but there's also a vow not to kill, so it's extra powerful when you take a vow. The benefit, the upside of taking a vow is, as I said, and clearly the downside as well if you go and break it all the time, you know. And then there's drugs and alcohol, or substances that will cause you to completely lose control of all your senses. So of course, why? Because it causes all the other problems, you know. They're the 5 vows. And the major one, the major breaks. I think the first 4. The last one, I think you just break it by doing it. I don't think it's a major break. I can't remember, I'm sorry. I can't remember. I haven't got my thing here. So, any questions about that? Vows? The Pratimoksha vows, individual liberation vows. No? Okay. All right.
Sorry, Robina.
Yeah.
Sorry, so you said that there's a difference between taking refuge and then taking vows
Yeah,
later.
separate. They're often done together, but they're separate little things. Taking refuge is where you formally commit yourself to being a Buddhist, which means you've got confidence in the Buddha and you don't want to suffer. That's why you're turning to the Buddha. You're relying upon the Buddha. You're relying upon his Dharma, which is the medicine you want to use and apply. And you're relying upon what they call the Sangha, the spiritual community, you know, as your supporters in your practice. That's refuge. That's your first step. Often the vows can be given at the same time, but it depends on the person giving it. You know. Then the second level is you take vows. Yeah. Then the next level of vows are, of course, the bodhisattva vows. And the next level after that are the tantric vows. And these are vows that actually last from life to life, they say. The bodhisattva, all vows in their nature are not to do something. Generally the use of the word commitment in Buddhism is the decision to do something. So they always talk about keeping our vows and commitments. So the bodhisattva vows are also vows not to do things. There's a lot more of them. There's 18 root vows and 46 secondary. 18, yeah. And they're also not to do this and not to do that. But the crucial difference here is that the character of the vow and the breaking of it is determined by the delusion that motivates it. The delusion that motivates it. And also these vows are more powerful than the first set, but they're dependent upon the existence in your mind stream of the first set. You can't have the bodhisattva vows unless you've got the 5 lay vows, the pratimoksha vows. And the bodhisattva vows are more powerful, and there's even there, because the main emphasis here is to not harm others, but the main emphasis in the bodhisattva vows is to benefit others. And so the vows are, the secondary vows are talked about in the context of the 6 perfections, of how to enhance one's practice at the bodhisattva level of the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva. So each of, there's groups of them in the 46 secondary that are related to those 6 perfections that prevent you from weakening your generosity, weakening your morality, weakening your patience and so on. And how they, by keeping those vows, it strengthens your practice of those 6 perfections. And they're determined by the motivation. So in this set of vows, you even have a vow to break an earlier vow if it's for the sake of sentient beings. And you would break a vow if you did, a bodhisattva vow, if you didn't break that vow. So, take them very seriously. And then you have the tantric vows above that, ahead of that, which are, based upon, dependent upon having the bodhisattva vows in your mind stream. And you take those when you take a highest yoga tantra initiation, such as Kala Chakra, Vajrayogini, these things. When you take a practice like Vajrasattva or Tara or Chenrezig, you take bodhisattva vows only, you don't take tantric vows then. They're only required when you take a highest yoga tantra initiation. Okay, so where are we here? So the determination not to do again is the 4th step. So obviously here, if you have, say, in the beginning of your practice, begun to think, I wouldn't mind being a Buddhist, okay, let's start with Buddha's instructions first. What are they? Well, let's abide by the 10 non-virtues. Let's, take the list of 10 don'ts here and use those as my guideline for how to be a better person, because that's all they are. You want to be a driver, you better get check your bullet points of what not to do so you can learn to be a better driver. And you have to remember them every day so you are a better driver. Don't put the clutch here when you put your foot on the accelerator. Don't do this when you do that. Don't go more than 70 miles an hour. Don't do this, don't do that. An awful lot more don'ts than the split of 10 here. So these 10 don'ts are to help you become a better person, that's all. You have the don'ts of a driver to become a better driver. When you play the piano, there are lots of don'ts there as well. So that helps you become a better pianist. Here, we're trying to become a better person. So our very first entry into being a Buddhist, isn't to sit and meditate. Everyone thinks being a Buddhist is being a meditator. Well, it's more advanced. That's too advanced. How can you control your mind if you can't control your body and speech? If you shoot your mouth off all the time and get raging angry and get upset and badmouth your ex-husband behind his back every day, you can't meditate. It's a joke. Your mind's so distressed and disturbed, you've been stirring up the nonsense by all your bad speech. So start controlling your speech, start controlling your body. Guess what? You'll start to control your mind. It's obvious. So the first level, entry level practice in Buddhism is just be a better person and take this checklist of 10 don'ts. It's not much. So you commit yourself. I will do my best not to kill sentient beings. It's not a vow yet. You're committing. I will do my best not to kill. Lie, steal, those 7 of the body and speech. And then, of course, there's the last 3 and this is my way of putting it, are just the beginning of working on your mind. You don't seriously start working on your mind until you get to the more advanced stages, like second scope of Lamrim, junior school, where you now start to meditate and learn to know Buddhist psychology, so you can start looking into your mind to get to the root of the problem, the root causes, your delusions. So you control your body and speech first. So these last three are about the mind. The grosser levels of the three main delusions. So the grosser level of attachment is what they call craving, even the word craving. The word crave, to covet, to be attached, to grasp, desire, they're all variations really of this state of mind called attachment, which, you know, as we know in Buddhism, has got a very distinct role. It isn't how we use the word in our culture at all. It's a neurotic, deeply ingrained, instinctive, we come born with it, the Buddha says, from past attachment. And the first level of attachment, the energetic level of it, is this profound dissatisfaction. Just a constant sense of never being enough, never having enough. And it can be so severe, and this is one of our worst sufferings in our culture. Look at us. And then on the basis of dissatisfaction, you obviously then have the craving to get something to fill up that gaping hole, don't you? And the most obvious first level is the objects of the senses. So this very first level of beginning to control our mind is to at least control the grosser levels of attachment, grasping after something, really coveting something, obsessively, all the way our mind is so stressed with food, and if you're attached to sex, for example, attached to having things, the grosser level of attachment. Why? For your sake, because your mind's your mind's so just distressed. So beginning to at least control the attachment, control this level of grasping, of coveting, a stronger level, craving, harness it as best we can. The second one is this heavy duty level of anger. They call it ill will. It sort of sounds kind of a nice word, but whether we use that much anymore, I don't know. But it's this one, and when you get angry and you can't let go of it, and you actually even want the person to suffer, that's this one. This is heavy duty. Unbelievable, like a nightmare, isn't it? And the third one, they call it wrong views, which sounds a bit abstract to us. But it means very, really deluded, based on the root ignorance, but very deluded, ignorant state of mind that really doesn't see things clearly at all, and as a result of that, very fundamentalist, very stuck in your views, very rigid in your views. Really ends up with a really deluded mind, very racist, very sexist, very eye for an eye, that kind of mind, narrow, ignorant mind. At least beginning to harness this crazy energy. These 10 don'ts, and not the list of the 10 non-virtues, as Buddha calls them. Starting with this as the basis of your day-to-day life. And so then if you've got that level first, then when you do the fourth step, first you do at the first step, if you've made a decision in your mind that you haven't maybe formally taken refuge yet, you haven't formally taken the vows yet, but you're thinking, this sounds reasonable, I'll attempt to live like this, taking Buddha's instructions as my basis, these 10 don'ts, So that's a commitment you've made to yourself. So obviously when you do your regret, the first one, you check these through and you make sure that you regret any of these that you might have weakened or broken. The commitment you took to yourself, You regret that. And really, the ones of body and speech, it's only 7. We do, the speech ones for us are the heavy duty ones, you can see, for us humans. The animals don't do that. Maybe we don't go around killing and raping too many people. We go around bad-mouthing, happily. We mightn't lie that much, but we love to bad-mouth people behind their backs. We mightn't do so much harsh speech. I think the ones we do mostly, perhaps, depends on who the person is, finding fault, speaking people's faults behind their backs, disharmonious talk, politicians, the ex-husband, the family, even our friends. Even the ones we feel sorry for, all the time criticising the alcoholic brother, Never stop talking about him. Stressed out about it, criticising, finding fault, blah this, blah that. Not to mention really heavy duty criticism, all the politicians, the people at work, We never stop. We do it all the time. We call it sharing, you know. And then the one of gossiping, rabbiting on about nothing, just exhausting your own energy, blur, you know. These we can see, we do a lot. We can see these. We think of them as so almost meaningless. We don't even think of them as a problem because we don't really see how our speech can affect our mind. We sort of do if we start to look, but but we don't join the dots, you know. So it's so powerful, just to control your body and speech. I swear to you, if you made a commitment to never speak bad words behind your back, people's back, to never speak rubbish, to never say a word that isn't true, and to never use half speech, you'd transform yourself right there. In a week, you'd be meditating like crazy, because your mind's become more peaceful. It's huge. Huge, actually. This is an amazing first level of practice. It's not rocket science. Just those 10, easy. That's the flow of speech, 3 of the body, 3 of the mind. It's not complicated. Really take it seriously. It's an amazing level of practice. So when you do this as your basis, then when you do the regret, you can regret those ones. You tick the boxes, go through, and you regret anything else, you know. But most of those, I mean, maybe you mightn't kill, but you might harm, you know. Whatever, with your body. You regret. That's the way we talked. Then when you do your last step, what we're talking about here, you say to yourself, because you have committed, I will do my best not to kill. Well, you say here, I will continue to do my best not to kill a living being. You haven't vowed yet, but it's a very powerful thought. I will do my best to not kill a living being, to not harm sentient beings, to not lie, not steal. You say this every day, and guess what? It's not rocket science. If you say that every day, you're programming that very tendency in your own mind. It's obvious the benefit. You see, we think of words as sort of meaningless. We don't think words have power at all. That's why we misuse them so terribly. And we don't think there's any benefit in having thoughts. We think it's just, it's only the mind, we'll say. It's the very opposite here. Every thought sows a seed, you know. Every instinct, every feeling sows a seed. So they're super powerful. So then the thought, I will try not to kill as much as possible. It's a stupendous, amazing thought. That thought is practice. It's incredible. Don't underestimate this simple kind of level of practice. So you go through your 10 things, and you do your best, and then your own particular rubbish, you know, your depression, your jealousy, your anxiety attacks, your anger, you know, I'll do my best, I'll watch it. Maybe a day I won't get jealous. Maybe for 5 hours I won't get angry. I always say, if you're going to go to bed at night at 10 o'clock, you can say, I will not be angry for 12 hours, or maybe 8. You'll be asleep. You'll be fine. And you get into the habit. So it's got great meaning, this practice, not just some cute thing, you know. It's got great meaning if we hear it more carefully. This is Dharma practice. This is a spiritual practice. We just assume that spiritual practice means a meditation. It's such a default thing in our minds. Excuse me, I don't care if you meditate. Do this. Really impressed. I swear. Powerful. So that's it, we're done. It's only 2 or 3 o'clock. So you have to ask me questions now. And we can do the practice again if you like. Yeah, go on.
So you talked about 10 known virtues.
Yeah.
The first 5 of them belong to lay vows, right?
No, that's what I'm saying. Not the first 5. Alcohol is not in there, is it?
Oh, okay.
See? The 3 of the body are there,
Yeah.
1 of the speech, and then alcohol is added. Alcohol and drugs. See? Can you see?
Yeah. Then
These
don't.
vows.
These are vows.
Mm-hmm. Don't ask me why. It's like that. I don't know why.
They use it in some kind of ceremonies, like a lay 5 precepts, or
What, dummy?
is it used in any kind of formal vow?
Yeah, that's what you do
ceremony?
when you sit down in front of somebody on your knee and you vow in front of somebody, I will never kill, I will never, like that, when you do it formally. That's when you take the 5 precepts, the 5 lay vows, and you do it formally, those 5 are that.
So the 5 lay vows include all these things?
No, the 5 lay vows are
Right.
killing, the first 3 of the body,
Right.
killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and then 1 of the speech, not the 4,
Lying.
lying. And then another one added, no alcohol and drugs. That's the set of 5 lay vows. Don't ask me why it's different from the 10. I don't know why.
Okay.
But that's what it is. This comes from Mr. Buddha himself. It's just what's tracked. There are several sets of these pratimoksha vows, and this is one set, the 5 lay person's vows. Okay? Are we clear?
Okay.
And that's what you take formally in front of somebody. That's when you become. That's when you take the 5. You take it formally. That's when it becomes very powerful. And it's then that you've got this subtle energy that's visible to clairvoyance, and it's got this like a subtle form, and that's very much. And your actions are so much more powerful now because of this. Do you understand? Okay. What else, people? Yes.
I'm a little confused about what idle or mundane speech is. It seems like it's everything.
No, no, it just means it's not. If you think of the delusions behind them, it's obvious that anger is behind harsh speech, and anger is behind, and anger, or could be resentful, could be jealousy, is behind bad mouthing people behind their backs. It's usually anger. It seems to me the idle one is just sort of this uncontrolled attachment energy to just express what we feel. And it's almost an anxiety with it. It's like we're with people, we feel compelled to just rab it on. And the extreme, you can see it doesn't even have to be very harmful speech. It doesn't mean you can't talk about the weather or say, hello, how are you? It's not that you have to talk about emptiness and bodhicitta all day. It's not a question of that. It's simply this uncontrolled, mindless kind of blur that people just often we all just get so caught up in. And because it's anxiety half the time. We just feel got to vomit it all out,
Restaurant talk.
Huh?
Restaurant talk.
Well, there you go, right. See, but the thing is, okay, so what's the difference between 2 people who are doing that, 2 groups of people? Well, you could say, if you're really being aware and conscious of what you say and do, and you want to become a better person, and you're trying to live according to these precepts, let's say, you're trying to do that. That doesn't mean you walk around with a long, serious face and never say a word to anybody. And only talk about, like I said, emptiness and bodhicitta. No, but with awareness, you're going to be saying, hello, Gina, how are you, darling? Isn't it a lovely day? That's not idle talk, that's called kindness. But you're conscious. You're conscious, rather than just blur, because we're unaware. Most of the time we're unaware of what we feel, then all this anxiety and worry what people think, we're still blurring out and just rabbiting on. It's not necessarily negative, it's not necessarily anything, it's just uncontrolled. That's what they mean by idle talk. That just is wasting your time. I mean, you can get a more strict reading of it. If you read these lamas and they're talking to a bunch of monks in a monastery, then the stricter reading of it, they would even consider that, going to movies and reading novels, that's all idle talk, wasting your time. So if you think of a practical sense, it's right. If you are totally committed to becoming a surgeon as quickly as possible, you do all that study, you've got hours of really intense study and homework to do, haven't you? So it is true to say going to the movies and reading a novel is a waste of time, but not in its nature a waste of time. It's a waste of time because it's taking you away from your focus. That's the meaning, not like, oh, you're naughty, you shouldn't talk about the weather, or it's sinful to see a movie. Because it's polluting and diluting our energy from the job we want to do, and of course because 99% is following attachment. Of course it is. So we've got to do it according to our level, according to our capacity, not be fundamentalist about it, get the meaning behind it, and then of course do our best. Do you understand? Just say. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is that the same thing as like going to a therapist and having, talking about everyday life and stuff like that?
Which one, the good or the bad?
Either.
Well, darling, I think if you've got a good therapist, they're not going to put up with you rabbiting on about nothing. They'll just chuck you out. The purpose, you're wasting their time if you're not going to talk about something serious to help you know yourself. They're there to help you know yourself. So that's different. Even for example, let's say we can't stand Gina. And we're both her friends. We go, that Gina this and that Gina that. We hate her. We badmouth her the whole time. That's called harsh speech. And that's called the one talking about people behind their backs, which causes disharmony, doesn't it? So then, but let's say you're my therapist, and I have a problem with Gina, and I come to you and I tell you the same things. But what's the reason I'm telling you? So you can help me sort out my problems. That's very different. That's very good, actually. You need to do that. So there's different, it's not just, oh, I can't say anything bad about Gina. Well, I have to be able to say what I think about Gina for me to sort out my own mess. That is a very different reason for speaking it. And it's in private, it's not meant to be bad-mouthing her, it's me to help me understand myself. And then the same with, with the idle talk, you can still say, hello, how are you? Yes, a lovely day, that's right. But it's being kind now, you're consciously being kind to the other person. And you'll happily listen to what they have to say to you. But, but the idle talk is uncontrolled blur, with no awareness and no thought of the other person. It's just this following our own attachment, need to say what I think. This is where it's just exhausting. We know it's exhausting to hear other people's just blur, And it can be quite serious and quite painful. I always remember, on a plane one time, I got on a lot of planes, and this woman in front of me, and the person next to her, within the first, even before we apparently got off the tarmac, before we got into the sky, she'd vomited out her entire life history already. And you could feel the compulsion in her to be heard was so desperate, which is our attachment to be, because we don't know how to hear ourselves. We were just pouring out to this stranger. It was painful to hear. Just pouring out uncontrolled. This is serious idle talk. More than idle talk, really. That was like painful. Do you understand what I'm saying? Idle talk really just means worthless rubbish that just exhausts your energy, drags you down somehow. So we've got to be, the whole thing, hang on, is to learn, it's painful. To change old habits, we all know, is extremely painful. So we can't get it right first. So inevitably you're going to go a bit to the other extreme and get all a bit holy, That's okay, but relax after a while and you start to get normal. You sort of find yourself, you have to be normal. You understand? Like if you get all serious in your path and you got a wife, let's say, and you start getting all serious, and I don't want to have sex because it could be attachment, and I don't want to drink, and I don't want to talk about although that's attachment. You don't have to pay a monk, excuse me. If you're going to be like that, go be a monk. Excuse me, you've got to be someone's husband. Be their husband, and be nice, and do nice things, Don't get all fundamentalist about it. There's nothing worse. But it's hard to find the balance. Just a sec. Yes?
Is there a time when harming, killing, or stealing is
Good.
or justified?
Okay, give an example. Let's use an example to discuss.
Self-defense, or keeping oneself warm if you're freezing to death, stealing a coat.
Okay, I understand. Well, first of all, we have to establish, don't we? We have to establish the basic poison. So we have to establish what seeds in that, what flowers in that garden will kill you if you eat them. Don't we have to know that? We have to know what will cause suffering. So in general, the weeds in our garden, I'm using this analogy purposely here, will cause us suffering, Buddha says. So obviously, we have to watch those like a hawk and not take them because they'll cause me suffering. So don't kill, don't lie, don't this, don't that. We've got to know that first. And mainly, as much as we can, prevent ourselves from taking those because it will poison me because I don't have any control. But you can imagine, can't you, as you get more advanced, you'll start to learn botany. You might be able to work out the way to extract some medicine from some poison. And the really advanced practitioners couldn't they? So in that same sense, by the time you've got more harnessed and more controlled, in first level of practice, just leave the weeds alone, don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, and you've harnessed yourself, then you get to the bodhisattva level. Like I said before, you've got a vow in the bodhisattva level that you must break another vow, an earlier vow, if it's for the sake of others. That's one answer to your question. Do you see what I'm saying? That's one answer to your question. So you've got to have some confidence in what you're doing. I'll answer your particular example in a minute. But in general, you would lie. Absolutely would lie if it's truly for the benefit of another. You would steal, for sure, if it's truly for the benefit of another. So if you're kidding yourself, then you're lying to yourself as well as breaking a vow. That's heavy duty. So you've got to be quite an advanced person to have confidence to do something that's labelled wrong because it truly is for the sake of another. You've got to know that and have some wisdom. That's quite advanced. You get my point, generally. Okay, so now let's look at the example you gave. If you're really on the street and you're starving, you're hungry, you're whatever, and you think the only way to get warm, otherwise I will die, is to steal a coat, and you really can't see another way, then you could say you're still stealing, but it's less negative, perhaps, you could argue. You could argue that maybe. Depends on your person. Depends. If you're a greedy person who feels self-pity and you don't think any other way, that's more negative. But if you're a person who really knows there's no one to ask for a coat, there's lots of ways of seeing it. Do you see my point? In other words, it's not a question of getting off the hook. It's a question of looking at the action itself and looking at the mind of the person, which means your own mind, to see what's motivating the action. So a person who's really poor, living on the street, could be a really greedy, deluded person who lies and steals. There's no virtue in that ever, even though they would think they have a valid reason. But if their mind is really mean, do you see what I'm saying? It's perfectly reasonable that a person could be, just because they're homeless doesn't mean they haven't got delusions. Do you understand? It depends on the person. Are we communicating? Do you think?
Yeah,
Not quite sure.
I'm-
Thinking about it. What other examples would there be?
Well, went to Dunkin' Donuts. My wife come out and I said, you should have grabbed a couple of sugars so we'd have some in the house for when our niece comes over.
Where's the sugar coming from? Where, what?
Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh yeah, no, there you go. Okay, listen. Good point. Let's analyse this. Listen, I get this point. You listen to this one. My thing is toothpicks. I always have my supply of toothpicks. So it's the same with Dunkin' Donuts. You listen. The toothpicks are offered. The sugar is offered, isn't it? So you're not actually breaking a vow of stealing if you take them, but maybe you're just adding to your greed. So all those toothpicks are offered. I could take the lot, but it's greed if I do it. I don't break a vow. I'm not stealing, but I'm just getting more greedy. So the same with Dunkin' Donuts, I would suggest. It just adds you greed, because you don't need the sugar. It's like, probably about a cent's worth. You understand what I'm saying? We have a habit to do this. We get all excited when we see something for free, so we want to hoard it. That's called greed. That's not called stealing. You get my point? Do you see what I'm saying? It's interesting points there. Watch our mind, Yeah. Yeah? Yes?
Going back to the example, we're talking about gossip.
Yeah.
Going back to the example about the medical student, the guy studying.
Wasting your time by going to movies and...
Yeah, which the answer there is more, it was like what I sort of understood the traditional answer to be in our religion. Having said that, how does one balance, if one isn't a monk, how does one balance
You
one's
do your
life?
best according to your capacity, darling.
Yeah, but I can either listen to you tonight or watch Downton Abbey.
Well, you can do both, because you can... Okay, you can put it deep. Come on.
Yeah, that's a metaphor. You're going to watch Downton Abbey, But how does
Okay,
one? Because one could always come out of this.
You've got to know your own level of capability.
Okay.
You've just got to know what you're capable of. But the trouble is, we get so caught up in guilt, we get all confused and
That's
beat
right.
ourselves
Yeah.
up. If you can't, listen to me, surely the quickest way to become a surgeon is to study 24 hours a day, go to night school and day school.
Yeah.
But who can do this? We're not capable. So we need to have a break. The best way to meditate, if you're the greatest meditator, like some of these yogis up in the mountains who don't need to sleep or eat or use clothing or anything, they meditate for months on end because they're capable. But they say the best way to do a retreat, you usually do it in terms of 4 sessions a day. You have 4 meditation sessions, and they all say you really do your session well, and then when you have your break, you really do your break well. You don't just sit there worrying about, I should be meditating. You really relax, you really enjoy yourself, you really go to the movie, you really enjoy, and then you're energized to go to the next session. You just got to be intelligent with ourselves instead of fundamentalists. It's ridiculous. And then, of course, if we've got bodhicitta motivation, which we try to put into the mix here, if we're Mahayana practitioners, because your long-term goal is to be that surgeon, then why are you going to your classes? So you can be a good surgeon. Why do you go to the movie? So you can do what? Be a good surgeon. It helps you relax, doesn't it?
Yes.
So you can study better. So you use your same motivation for both. That makes it very powerful. Do you see my point? Why am I going to go to sleep? So I can relax, because I have to have sleep. So I'm going to sleep so I can be more awake and alert, so I can study better. So in the end, that's what bodhicitta is, bringing it into our daily life. We do everything with the thought, I'm going to sleep so I can be happier, so I can do my practice, so I can become a Buddha. I'm going to eat so I can be alert, so I can become a Buddha. Best to do 24 hours a day, but you do according to your capacity. Do you understand?
Yeah.
You live or going? Where are you going?
I'm still on the
Oh,
phone.
no. She wants to
Go
get
to the front
closer.
row.
She wants to get closer.
I know.
I think it's
Sorry.
more.
Okay.
Thanks for showing Downton Abbey.
I remember, I'd never heard it done. It was about 2 years ago when I was in Australia and I was with a friend. And we sat down and watched a few of this thing called Downton Abbey. I'd never heard of it. I thought it was the most ridiculous program. The stupidest script, really corny, the dumbest. I could not believe that I heard about how famous it was. I couldn't believe it. I even watch it now. But I think I was spoiled by watching that amazing movie of, what's that one? God, I forget the names. Amazing, 3-hour movie. Helen Mirren was in it. The same, all about up and down, you know, beautiful film.
God's report.
Yeah, Gosford Park. If you see that movie, Downton Abbey's pathetic. Have you seen Gosford Park? You'll see. It's an amazing movie, a beautiful film. So I think I was ruined by Gosford Park. I still watch that. I mean, look at it on the things, you know.
That's right.
It's just crummy in comparison. Yeah. So excuse me, that's my personal opinion. That wasn't Buddha talking, that was Robina talking. Go on.
What is the need for a guru?
Okay. What's a guru, do you think? Tell me what you think it means.
The teacher is the exact word, but
Okay.
it seems like there's a lot more wrapped up in it than just being a teacher.
Okay. Okay, let's look at this. All right. What time is it? Past me. Okay. Well, you know, if you read the very traditional Buddhist texts, the Tibetans, you know, you read like Lama Tsongkhapa's 14th century text, the Lam Rim, and it's like it'll blow your mind. You'll keep right away from these maniac Buddhists. It's so intense. It sounds so heavy. It's like unbelievable. You won't even understand. I mean, I just can't even go there because it's so heavy and intense. The meaning of it is so profound. Okay, so let's keep it simple. I try to keep it simple for my own mind. First of all, my feeling is that if we look at anything on earth that we have learned, would you not agree that we've learned it from another person? Would you agree with that? Yeah. So that's obvious. So it's sort of obvious. You don't reinvent the wheel. That's just the arrogance beyond belief. You ask, the quickest way to learn something is you ask somebody who knows how to do it. That's obvious, isn't it? So obviously, the best person to ask is a knowledge holder. This lovely name in Tibetan of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I love the word, Tenzin. It literally means, ten is Dharma or knowledge, and Zin means holder. Knowledge holder. It's a lovely phrase. Wouldn't you agree that Mozart was a knowledge holder of music? You know? My mother, whom I learned cooking cakes from, was a knowledge holder. Someone who has the experience of that knowledge. Wouldn't you agree that's the person you should ask to teach you something? Yeah? Well, that's what a guru is. They even say the term in Sanskrit is heavy with knowledge. Heavy with knowledge. It's a lovely phrase. So, of course, in the traditional Buddhist teachings, especially coming from the highest level of the Tibetan, which is the Tantric teachings, right back to India, when you read all the texts about guru devotion, you read the texts about Milarepa, you read the texts, the stories of Tilopa and Naropa, all these amazing great yogis, it's kind of profound and heavy duty, but it's sort of wonderful magical mystery tour of miracles and dramas and blessings and Lord knows what, you know. It's quite got a huge history. The bottom line is, it seems a no-brainer that we need a knowledge holder. And okay, cakes even. Okay, I use my example of karate. It was actually karate, yeah. When I learned karate for about a year in some place I lived, because I learned later, I got to about the 4th belt. I can't remember this, and I was thinking I was the ant's pants. So then I went back home to Melbourne and continued the same style in another school. And then the teacher saw me a couple of times and he put me back to the white belts. And I was really offended. My pride was so insulted. But then I thought about it, and until that point, it had been my big policy actually, I was in this sort of process of discovering who I was and really knowing that I had to do it myself. I didn't want stupid teachers. Who wants a teacher? I'm the boss. I have to do it. And that's true. But what I learned from that experience was that the past year that I'd learned that karate, I didn't choose the teacher properly. So for 1 year, I learned bad karate. And I realised it, and then I realised the benefit of a teacher. I didn't know it was wrong, because I chose the teacher for the wrong reason. Do you understand? I didn't use my intelligence and check up properly on whether this person was a valid teacher. And they turned out not to be. But I didn't know that because I didn't check properly, and I used the wrong reason to choose this teacher. And then when I found the one who was good, which I stumbled across, then I learned the necessity to get a good teacher. That's something simple, karate, you know. So I had to learn from scratch again. That really showed me.
So can you be a guru?
Me?
Could you be like my
that,
guru?
No, okay. We have to choose our own teachers. It's personal, you know. We have to decide who we think. So that you look in the text and you read the qualities of a person who's to really be a valid knowledge holder. The best teacher is the Buddha. Now, okay, but then it gets tricky. Who knows what a Buddha is, you know? We don't have no idea. If you're a Buddha also, then you don't need a Buddha. But the best teacher, the most qualified knowledge holder is the most qualified. So The very least that we should do is we check up on the teachers, you know. So let me tell you about my experience with Lama Yeshe, how I chose my teachers, okay. But I want to first give the example of how I learned to make cakes, which is the same analogy. It's the analogy for choosing to make a teacher. And to me, it was very tasty. The first step has to be that I want to learn that thing. So I wanted at the age of 26 to learn how to make a cake. I always quote this. I'm sorry if you've heard it before. It's very boring. It finally took me till I was 26 to know I wanted to learn to make a cake. Then I happened to be going home to Melbourne to my family to see my mum. I was in London. And I thought, good, I'll ask my mum. Now, believe me, I didn't ask my mum because I was being kind to my mum, because I wasn't kind to my mum. But I knew she was a cake maker. I knew she was valid. I knew she was a Tenzin, a knowledge holder, because I'd tasted her cakes. In other words, I'd done my research, which is exactly what we should do for a teacher. I checked that my mother, it's easy for cakes, obviously. I tasted her cakes. I checked her students. I tasted their cakes. Her peers says she was a good cake maker. So because I don't know that my mother, this is the crucial point, as I don't have any experiential knowledge of cakes, how would I know if I just asked anybody, like my karate teacher, show me karate? I'd have no basis for deciding if they were good. So this first teacher of karate I chose, I didn't do any research. I chose him because it was convenient. So therefore I made a mess. So my mum, I'd done my research. I knew she was good. I tasted her cakes. I tasted her sister's cakes, her daughter's cakes. Her peers said she was good. So I'd done all my research. So I had some confidence. It was inferential knowledge, not experiential. I didn't have it yet. So when she finally did, and I remember the day, and this is also the power of the teacher, I remember the day, the kitchen, the time, the cake. It was an apple and walnut cake. I was ready. She had the knowledge. I asked her. She told me, and I did it. And somehow it went in deeply. And as Lama Yeshe put it about the point of a teacher, it was the first time for me that cakes became real. The power of the person is huge, isn't it? That was the power for me. I could have looked in a book, but I'll never forget that experience because it was the power of my mum, whom I had confidence in because I've checked up, and I listened to her, she told me, and I did. I kind of got a transmission of knowledge from my mum. Do you understand? We know this, we think of it every day, but if you read the guru thing, you don't sort of make the connection. It's the same logic, you know. So clearly, with cakes, it's a lot easier, or even karate. But here we're talking about finding someone to lead us to enlightenment, which is an unknown territory for us. So for this one, and also, of course, because here, given that we're making connection with certain people, with certain paths, and we don't want to go up the track and choose the wrong karate teacher, because it'll affect us from life to life. You get my point? It's going to be lifelong. The connections you make with people, the connections, the commitments and everything is very powerful because we're going to get that one again and again and again. So we better check really carefully that we do make the connections right, which means all the more than merely checking the Buddha's teaching before we take refuge is to check the teachers who are presenting those teachings. So we've got to have absolute confidence that they are valid. Check the students, check their behaviour, check their teachings. You've got to be really confident, not some emotional thing. Be genuinely confident. You understand? Then on the basis of that, having done all the other, you then request that person, you know, whom you feel you're prepared. Because the real long-term one, the highest way to see this teacher, the best way, the most advantage to oneself, the quickest way to get realizations is then having committed, we see that person as if they were the Buddha. And that's just very skillful because even if they're not the Buddha, but if I have the view that my teacher, so okay, I'll tell you about how I met Lama Yeshe, my main teacher. Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa actually. So Lama Zopa is the spiritual director of the FPMT, which is the worldwide organisation of centres that Kurukulla is part of, okay? And they began in Lama Zopa was a Sherpa. He came out of, Sherpa country, Nepal. Although actually he was just on the border of Tibet in a monastery at the time of 59 when the things happened, and he was about 14. He'd been recognised himself as a reincarnated Lama when he was a little boy. The local people, he was recognised as the reincarnation of the previous Lama. So he was already what they call a Rinpoche. So he escaped to northern India, where all the Tibetans went after the big business in 59. And then Lama Yeshe, who had come from Tibet, he was about 25, 26, 24 maybe, 10 years older than Lama Zopa. He was in one of the big monastic universities, Sera Monastery in Lhasa, so he escaped, and they both ended up at the same place. And then a mutual Lama got Lama Yeshe to take care of Lama Zopa, so he became his main disciple. So in the mid-60s, they were in Darjeeling, where Lama Zopa was to recuperate from TB, which is very common still for the Tibetans coming down from the mountains to the plains. They get TB very often. So they're in Darjeeling, and they met their first Western student, some, well, Eastern European, but she was living in America, and her name was Zina. She became a nun eventually, and then they went to Kathmandu. It was in the early 70s, 71 or something, 70, 71. And then they started meeting all these hippies who were coming from the West looking for drugs and enlightenment. They seem to, I don't know why, but we Westerners seem to think enlightenment and marijuana came together. I don't know why. And then you see all these Tibetans, I don't know what it was, but maybe all these Tibetans wearing coloured clothes and men wearing earrings and long hair. It was the hippie thing, you know. They thought, oh well, they must be hippies. But actually Tibetans are the most conservative people you could ever meet. If they were, you know, they'd be wearing their shirts and ties and wearing their handbags and gloves if they were wearing like us Westerners. Anyway, whatever. So Zina would, you know, bring her toy boy lamas out and introduce them to all her hippie friends from Hollywood and everywhere, and all smoking marijuana, and then whatever. I'm being a bit sarcastic. Anyway, eventually, more and more Westerners came, and then they eventually moved to Kopan Monastery, which is up out of Kathmandu. And it used to be the home of the king's astrologer. And the first little temple, it's still there now. Now it's virtually a village of 400 monks, and down the road there are 400 nuns. It's huge. It's like a monastic university now. So in the early 70s, all these Westerners started having, Lama Zopa started teaching courses. And they're still going on, you know, since 1971. And from there, the Lamas started being introduced. You know, Westerners would come, they'd go home to their own places, and they'd starting centres. And so I think the first centre was in India, in Dharamsala, Tushita, the retreat centre in Dharamsala. And then the next one was Chenrezig Institute in Australia, which is where I met the Lamas. So they started the first centre there. The first teaching with them was something like 1974. And then it spread from there. Now there's maybe 150, 200 centres around the world, whatever. But I met the Lamas in 1976. So there I was, having been a Catholic in Melbourne, and then I became a hippie and gave up God and said, hello boys, goodbye God, because you can't have both, you know, being a good Catholic. And I didn't have any guilt, so I had no problem changing. Thank you God, bye, hello boys. So then I was a hippie, raging hippie, and sex and drugs and jazz. I didn't like rock and roll. Jazz, not so jazz. Then I went to London and started sort of becoming a bit of an old radical lefty, you know, black politics and communist politics and all that kind of business, and then feminist politics. And then, a few years, for me, they were always looking for a spiritual, not spiritual, I didn't know it was called that at the time, but looking for a way of seeing the world, I think, is my best way to put it. Always what drove me. I wanted happiness, for sure, but I wanted a way of seeing the world. I'm not trying to sound noble or anything. I wanted a view. I wanted the truth. I wanted freedom and truth, you know. That's what I thought most drove me in my life. So, actually, when I was a very little girl, as soon as I went to Mass, I knew that priest was my job. I announced my decision to be a priest, you know. They all laughed, of course. And they told me I could be a nun. So then when I was 12, I was on my knees begging my mother to let me be a nun like Saint Therese of Lisieux. And of course I cried and Mum said no. And then 20 years later Mum cried and I became a Buddhist nun. Anyway, what happened was I became, you know, finally found then I did martial arts, is when that came in. And I was sort of beginning to want a spiritual path again. You know, I couldn't keep blaming all the rest of the world. I blamed all the non-Catholics and then all the rich people and all the white people and all the male people. I had no one left to blame, so I had to look at myself. So then I bumped it. So when I was back in Australia in 1976, having done karate, but I broke my foot so I couldn't do karate, I was devastated. Mr. Bill Bright, whom I'm eternally grateful to, ran over my foot. I'm very happy, grateful to him. So then as a result of that, I couldn't do my karate, so I sued him and got $4,000. Somebody said I should sue him because my karate career was ruined. So then I went to Kopan Monastery. I went to Chenrezig Institute first, and I met the Lamas, so now getting to the point. Okay. So the thought of a guru was disgusting to me. I saw the benefit of a teacher when I taught my karate, but the word guru was horrible. You know? When I'd been an old radical lefty, there was nothing worse than this idea of a guru. Oh my God, you know, it was a hideous word. So when I went to this course, part of me knew I'd found all this business, find your home, blah, blah, how people talk, you know. That's just because I had karmic connection. I mean, don't get too holy about that. I remember this white supremacist I read about who was 19, that when he read Hitler, he said he found he'd come home. So it just means karmic connection. That's all. So I'm lucky that I had karmic connection not with Hitler, but with some Tibetans. Quite useful, you know, so I was most grateful. Anyway, there's Lama Yeshe, and I felt that I would do 2-month intensive courses and 1 month Lam Rim with Lama Zopa, and I didn't understand a word he said. I could understand his words, but I didn't get the meaning. It was this esoteric, arcane stuff, and I kept saying to myself, where's the Buddhism? And the only word I could hear was karma, and I understood I heard what it meant, cause and effect. All I know is I like that word, So anyway, I listened to the course, then I did another month's retreat with Lama Yeshe. So I struggled a lot at this course. Lama Zopa was this holy being, and I couldn't really see him. He just seemed too ethereal to me, and I couldn't get him at all. But Lama Yeshe would come and give us talks, and I understood. He kind of, oh wow, now I know what he's talking about. He had this ability to speak in a very down-to-earth, psychological way that really touched Westerners, I remember Gene Smith, this amazing American scholar who passed away a couple of years ago, who does this huge Tibetan thing of saving texts. He's been doing it for 40 years. The Rubin Museum funded him for years, recently. Anyway, he said he met Lama Yeshe. He was a friend of Zena, and he met her in the mid-60s, Lama Yeshe. He said he'd never heard such crazy English in his life. But he said somehow he had this ability to communicate. It was really remarkable. And I've been editing Lama Yeshe over these years, and sometimes I read his teachings and I haven't got a clue what he's saying, because he's completely chaos. There's no grammar. It's just nihilistic. But the words he chooses are so perfect, Anyway, I hear Lama and I feel relieved. I heard Lama Zopa, I got stressed out. But I stayed. I was happy to be there. I knew this was my path somehow. Then I heard Lama Yeshe. He made me feel better. And then at some point, I'd say to myself, I'd look at Lama and I'd go, where do I know you from? It was this very strong connection, feeling. I had no idea of reincarnation then. And I kept thinking, I liked this person. He attracted me. He just attracted me. Even though I was still an all radical, blah, 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 feminist. Nevertheless, I liked him, And then I took refuge at this course. And I didn't think of the guru thing yet. It was still a weird word. But what happened was, I went home to Melbourne. And for the first 6 months, I did this practice every day. I did a practice every day. I knew I'd found my path. And then one day, sort of the penny dropped. And I thought, oh, Lama Yeshe's my guru. And I felt embarrassed. And I whispered to my sister Polly, I've got a guru, but don't tell anybody. So the word guru was still horrible to me, But somehow, I'd done what they said. I remember going to the first teachings. I remember being very impressed by the nun there, Yeshikado, who ran the centre, who was a new nun teaching the centre. I looked at the students. I was impressed by the students. I looked at Lama Yeshe. I watched his qualities. I observed his students. I watched how he talked. I'm not that I could see that much. I didn't see him in the privacy of his bedroom, but he seemed to me authentic. He seemed to put his money where his mouth was, and then I'd hear reports about him. That's important. You hear his reputation. That's huge, And everything I heard was good. So I had some basis for my decision. Like with my mum, I had to do the checking. He was powerful. He was very charismatic. But I had to have a deeper basis for choosing. And then at some point, I made the decision. Okay, and so then a year later, 6 months later, I went and had demanded a meeting. I was so arrogant. I didn't know you're supposed to request, this formal thing you do of requesting. Well, I informed him, it was my teacher, He said, yes, I know, dear. I remember that. So anyway, then he became my Lama. So then I would say to you, the hard work started. I didn't know that many teachings. I'd heard the idea of, he's now, I see him as the Buddha. But the real hard work started, I would say then. Because I'd made this commitment to this person. We'd shaken hands on it. We'd done a deal, And his deal was, he will do, my deal was, I'm giving, you see, he's the boss. But I'm the boss really, because I decided he is my teacher. I'm the one who made the call. I'm the one who decided I'm going to trust this person with my life, with my mind. That's a pretty big ask. So that means I'd better be bloody certain that he is, I'm giving him my heart basically. So I had better be certain that he is worthy of my heart. That's a way to put it, and I'm not joking here. I have to be certain that he's worthy. That means I have to check up. That it's a big thing to commit yourself. Do you understand? Because it is lifelong if we talk about karma. And if you make a mistake in choosing the wrong person who'll lead you up a garden bloody path, excuse me being Australian here, then you're going to lead yourself up garden paths for countless lives, if the karmic one. So you better be clear, better be clear. So I felt some certainty with Lama Yeshe. So then the hard work started, because I'd just, given him permission to do whatever he needs to do to help my mind. So he sees my mind, so he knows how to help my mind, and believe me, from then it became difficult. Because, at the point, for me in particular, my practice, okay, from the very beginning, because I've got all this energy to do things, I like to do things, I like to get on with things. The thought of becoming a Buddhist nun was very obvious to me, because I've been since I was born. I had this karmic thing of wishing to be a monastic, no problem. Giving up sex, no problem. Drugs, no problem. Clothing, houses, didn't want any of this. Didn't want babies, didn't want to live with people. Living up with a person was putting me in prison, So for me to be free and do my own trip, and I committed to this Lama Yeshe, and I wanted to just get on with work, get on and do things. The thought of meditating, boring, didn't want that. So, if you'd let me on my own, I would have run the show. If you tell me to run FPMT, I would have run it. Tell me to run Wisdom, I would have run it. And I was doing that job of editing. And then one day, Lama moved us all to England. And I got a note saying, from Nick actually, who was my first boss. And Nick said about Wisdom, I thought it was my job to run it, I just like to run things. And Lama says, Lama said, fantastic, Robina can be the secretary. Well, I nearly fainted. I was so stunned. Because for me, everything in my being said that it was my job to run it. Because I like to run things. It was so clear, like it was written in stone, And there's Lama Yeshe saying, fantastic, I'll be the secretary. And I said to myself, I'll never forget it, poor Lama, he doesn't understand. Then, I heard the name, this is very funny actually, I heard the name of the person Lama Yeshe had appointed to be the director. Because Lama's my spiritual teacher, but he's also my boss because I work for his organisation. And all I know is it was a Tibetan name, he's an American fellow. The moment I heard this name, I wanted to rip his limbs out from limb to limb and upside down, his legs apart. I hated him with such passion, I can't tell you. I was shocked at the rage that rose in my mind, Now, excuse me, but this is my Dharma practice we're talking about here. Not sitting on my wretched bottom looking all holy, but full on, in my face, the person I have entrusted with my mind, seeing my mind, and seeing what is best for my mind. So clearly, he had to be quite brave to do that. You understand? No attachment to what I thought. But fortunately, I trusted him. It was ranting and raving and screaming and yelling in my mind, struggling mightily, but it took me years. It took me 25 years of working for these lamas for me to get the job called director. And that was when I ran the prison project. So this has been my practice, not sitting in retreats, but dealing with my pride, my attachment, my anger, and who better to do it than these lamas who see my mind, whom I've entrusted to help me see my mind, which is their real job. So I'm not trying to be dramatic, but it can be quite intense. Are we communicating here?
Yep.
Well, different people, different things. Some people who knew Lama Yeshe, all I saw him was about 6 foot tall, and he scared the life out of me. He was so wrathful sometimes. Other people just think of him as this cute little sweet person who just smiles and is happy. So each person sees what they need. Each person gets what they need, I mean, a friend of mine in prison, so funny. I told him I swore sometimes. He said, oh, Robina, you don't. You're just a nice little old lady. No one's ever called me a nice little old lady. So he sees me this way, what can I tell you? You understand? So we have to choose, check, be careful, and then request. And then the person has to agree. So that's up to you to decide.
Thank you. You're very clear.
Good. Yes. Yes,
You can
Kat.
have more than one teacher.
You can have hundreds if you like, yeah. Of course you can. But obviously you choose your teachers according to your own capacity, and as long as you choose teachers, you're not going to feel a contradiction, because obviously even all these lamas are all going to be different. One lama will answer one way, another lama will answer another, so you don't manipulate between them and try and kind of play sides. You really be skillful in choosing which ones you ask which questions. But you really practice, especially the major practice, which takes time and especially is really developed when you take initiations, is you really practice, the main practice, the heart of your success is your ability to see all of them as a manifestation of Buddha. They're all showing you different aspects, but they're all the manifestation of Buddha for you. Because if it's the Buddha, then everything they do and say is perfect advice for you. And that's the real practice. This is the toughest one. And why this is so skillful is because our instinct now with delusions is to find fault when we see something we don't like, isn't it? Naturally. So if a person does everything we like if we go to the Dalai Lama's teachings, most of us, we just go to his teachings, he's very charismatic, everybody adores him, and we all walk out when the teaching's over. But I mean, anyone, even people I've known who work closer to him, they say he's very wrathful. So you've really got to be careful, because if the person's being wrathful, that's not doing what you think a nice Buddha should do. They're supposed to be all sweet and cute, aren't they? And I see this with Lama Yeshe, he scared the life out of me. But because I trusted that he was the Buddha for me, then it was cool, because he was doing whatever was beneficial for my mind. But that's a big ask when you've got ego in there. So it forces you against the instinct to find fault, because you always think the fault is out there, not your own mind, That's the really tough one. but that's the one that'll get you very quickly to get the realization. Do you understand? Do you understand? Catherine?
Very helpful, very helpful, yes.
So it's a serious
I'm
decision.
approaching understanding, I mean.
Well, even
am I
here
gonna say
intellectually is important,
understand?
but it's a
No.
serious decision to make, you know?
Yeah.
And then you learn to cultivate the view, as I said, that all your teachers are the manifestation of the same Buddha. And it's long term, you're in for the long haul. It's not just, oh, take, it's like, chuck out your husband, get a new one. You're in for the long haul. So it's a very powerful practice, actually. So it means you've got to be confident. You've got to be confident. You have to be confident. Based on your own intelligence, your own research. You have to be confident. That's the one. So what else do you want? Yes, Catherine. Sorry, Mary Ann. Go
It
ahead.
seems to me, I'm from Western, there's a lot to get my mind around, and one of the hardest is the continuum of continuity of thought.
Okay. Hardest to comprehend or just to hear it intellectually?
Probably both. I understand it from a particle physics level.
Well, that's not going to help here, though,
Well,
because it's not physical.
It's helped me get this far.
Oh, okay, good. I beg your pardon.
Being able to say,
Okay, fine, let's go.
all of us are walking around with a piece, little flakes of Egypt and before.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You know, okay.
All right, okay.
So,
Okay.
and compost,
Good,
bury
good,
me in
good.
the
I
compost
understand.
pile,
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
right, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But I'm not there yet.
That's
on-
okay. I think the thing, Catherine, is because we're intelligent, you're intelligent, you just have to take it as a hypothesis. It's not, don't try to understand it, but just to hear it as a hypothesis. The thought, the concept, the idea that thoughts are not physical, the idea that your mind is a continuity of mental moments and that it can go back and back, it's not a complicated thought.
No.
So then you start with the thought. It's sort of like you've been allopathic all your life and now suddenly you have these weird wacko Chinese who do acupuncture. You don't have to sort of understand yet what a meridian is. You just learn the word meridian. You learn the words first, just ordinary words, to try to get the model clear in your mind, and then slowly it goes deeper as you learn it. But we try to force ourselves to understand it deeply first. We go nuts. You can't. You just can't, because it's so different. You just can't. So you just take the view. It's a continuity. Okay, you say the words. That's enough. And then you learn more about karma. That helps you learn about mind. Then you learn about emptiness. That helps you learn about the mind. Each piece you learn reinforces the other piece. And it will do that if the system is valid. If the system is not, it will be all contradictory. And we're very capable of that because we're very intelligent. Do you see my point?
Grow into it.
Yeah, precisely. You've got to have the words first. That's it. Just say the words. Have the words, a hypothesis. Well, it could be a maniac. It could be completely ridiculous. But we're prepared to give it a go, That's all I'm saying. I'm going to do, giving it a go. Taking Buddha as my working hypothesis. Why don't you have a little break and come back and we can read the meditation to finish the day. Yes, Mary.
Can I ask two quick questions?
Go, darling.
The first is on guru and teachers. So guru, does it have to be someone who's got a title attached to it, such as a Lama Yeshe Rinpoche or
Well, why don't you analyse that yourself? So what I said before, how you work, what I said before, did anywhere in there say that, so tell me what you think. What do you think the answer to that is?
Well, from the takeaway is that I have to be worthy, that the guru is worthy of our heart.
Right, so
our mind.
to answer your question then,
Sorry?
to answer your particular question,
Yes.
anything from what I said before, can you get any hint into the answer to that question from what I said before?
Yeah, I would say that there doesn't have to be a title attached to it.
So then what are the qualities a person should have in order to qualify as your guru?
That it's somebody whom I'm willing to trust my
And that
my
person
mind.
has to have certain qualities, don't
Right,
they?
yes, they have certain training.
They need to
background.
have, they need to, I didn't say it before actually, there's minimum qualities.
Okay.
Best is to have the qualities of Buddha.
Okay.
And minimum is, they're more wise than you,
Yeah,
they've got compassion, their behaviour is good, and they truly care about to help you. They have love for you and want to help you. The bare minimum I'd suggest is that. Excuse me, the teaching suggests that. The bare minimum. That'd be the qualities of a good music teacher, wouldn't they?
right,
Same here.
Right.
Same logic. Same logic. They've got to care about you, have more knowledge than you, otherwise why go to a piano teacher who knows less than you? It's rather silly.
right.
You understand? And truly have love, which is wanting to make you happy and wanting to advise you and have some compassion and seem to look like they put their money where their mouth is, as best as you can see. They're the bare minimum requirements for a person to qualify as your teacher. Right. Yeah?
Yeah.
Better than that is to have realizations, have renunciation, realization emptiness, bodhicitta, all these things, you know? Best.
Right, and how would you go about knowing if that person
You can't,
has-
that's the
you can't,
point.
okay.
That's the point.
Yeah,
That's
right.
why the practice of seeing what you can see,
Yeah,
and then the practice of seeing them as the Buddha.
okay.
Because you can't see.
No, I realize that.
That's the point.
I thought about that, yeah.
That's the point. Do you understand?
So with regard to teachers, you say some people can have hundreds of teachers or whatever. Is that also a formal process, or is that you just attend teachings and you hear, maybe
No,
visit
you
with
can
somebody
have
for
a
few
formal
months?
process, or you can have a person, I mean, many people might not get a meeting with His Holiness the Dalai Lama to request informally, but I'd say the vast majority of all Tibetan Buddhists feel he is one of their teachers.
Okay.
And anyway, they've taken initiation, then he's certainly one of your teachers. So it doesn't always be the formal, it doesn't have to be that.
Okay, I
It
see.
doesn't have to be that, it's from your side, the main one, your side.
And last quick question
Yeah.
about idleness.
Idle talk,
Idle talk, yes, thank you. idle
rabbiting
talk.
on about nothing.
Exactly. Any advice if I come across somebody now and then, but whom they're not out of my life, but not in it 24/7, who it's just so evident, unfortunately, that they're rabbiting on. It's
So then what's the point? What's the question?
Any advice in terms of how
Yes,
to?
be kind.
Okay.
What else?
Okay.
If you're going to be with them, are you going to be with them for a month, a day, an hour,
No.
5 minutes?
No.
What, how long? This particular person you're talking in your mind you're discussing? What would it be? A meeting, a movie?
No.
Lunch?
Maybe as long as they rabbit on until I sort of kind of kindly cut them off.
Okay, right, so then, okay.
But
I
I'm near
understand.
them physically enough that whenever I interact with them, that's happens automatically every time.
So then, just be kind,
Okay.
but if you're going to be wise as well,
Okay.
which means having the wisdom to know how to help them, see their mind without
Right.
being rude.
Right.
But that means they've got to be ready to see it.
Exactly.
So that most of the time, it's not your job to do that. It's not your relationship. It's not your agreement to be their teacher. So just be kind.
Okay.
And then have the courage, though. Like, we mostly we mostly can't stand it. We're sitting there being passive-aggressive, and we're scared to stop the conversation, and then we complain about them to other people. I'm not saying you now.
Right.
So we have to have the courage, if you don't want to hear them rabbiting on, for your sake as much as anything, as well as theirs, you simply have the courage to, I'm so sorry, I've got to go. But most people on the phone, for example, sit there and they tell you about how they sat there for 3 hours while their mother raved at them. Well, I sort of want to say, well, why didn't you hang up? So then you want to blame your mother. So we can't be babies and be passive and then blame the other person. Make a decision.
Right.
If you're going to be with them for 10 minutes, make a decision. They're yours for 10 minutes.
Right.
And be kind. Otherwise you go, I'm really sorry, I've got to go now.
Well,
Excuse me.
that's what I do because
Good. Out of kindness.
It's enough. I don't know how much.
Okay, so I understand, Mary. It's
Yeah.
okay. Do you see?
I do.
It's up to us, you know. Kindness and wisdom. Courage. So have a quick break, folks. I'll see you in 10 minutes. So we have to do them